each one of you. On behalf of the Bangalore Chamber of Finance and Commerce, we welcome each one of you to this session. Before we could start, let's have our Kannada patriotic song to be played first.
जय भारत जननीय तनुजाते जय हे कर्नाटक माते जय सुंदर नदी वनಗಳ ನಾಡಿ ಜಯ ಹೇ ರತನುಸಿಗಳೇ ಭೂದೇವಿಯ ಮಕುಟದ ನವಮಣಿಯೇ ಅಂದದ ಚಂದದ ಹೊನ್ನಿನ ಮಣಿಯೇ ರಾಘವ ಮಧುಸೂದನ ರವತರಿಸಿದ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ कर्नाटक माते जननीय जो कुल वेदद घोष जननिಗೆ ಜೀವವು ನಿನ್ನಾವೇಶ ಹಸುರಿನ ಗಿರಿಗಳ ತಾರೆ ಎಲ್ಲಯ ಕೊರಳಿನ ಮಾರೆ ಕಪಿಲ ಪತಂಗಲ ಗೌತಮ ಗಿರಣದ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಶಂಕರ ಮನುಜ ವಿದ್ಯಾರಣ್ಯ ಬಸವೇಶ್ವರರಿನ ದಿವ್ಯಾರಣ್ಯ ಕನ್ನ ಷಡಕ್ಷರಿ ಪುಣ್ಯ ಮಂಗಲ ಕುವಿಪತಿ ಜನ್ನ ಕತ್ತಿಗರದಿರ ಮಂಗಳ ರಾಮ ಕವಿಗೋಗಿಲೆಗಳ ಪುಣ್ಯ ರಾಮ ನಾಯಕ ರಾಮ ವೀರರ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಭೈರವ ಹೊಯ್ಸಳ ನಾಡಿದ ನಾಡೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಜಗಣರ ನೆತ್ತಿನ ಬೀಡೆ ಕೃಷ್ಣ ಶರಾವತಿ ತುಂಗ ಕಾವೇರಿಯವರ ಗಂಗ ಚೈತನ್ಯ ಪರಮಹಂಸ ವಿವೇಕರ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಸರ್ವ ಜನಾಂಗದ ಶಾಂತಿಯ ತೋಟ ಸತಿಕರ ಕನ್ನಡ ಸೇಯುವ ನೋಟ ಹಿಂದೂ ಕ್ರೈಸ್ತ ಮುಸಲ್ಮಾನ ಭಾರತಿಕ ಜೈನರು ಧ್ಯಾನ ಜನಕನ ಹೋಲುವ ದೊರೆಗಳ ಧಾಮ ನಾಯಕ ವೈದಿಕರ ರಾಮ ಕನ್ನಡ ನುಡಿ ಕುಣಿದಾಡುವ ದೇಹ ಕನ್ನಡ ತಾಯಿಯ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ದೇಹ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ.
Thank you all for the salutation of the state Karnataka song. Now, before we could start, we will have a minute of a silence. The BCIC would like to offer its tribute to all those who have lost their lives to COVID-19 and pray for their soul for the rest in peace. And also, we'll express our gratitude to all the frontline COVID-19 warriors for their invaluable service that they are rendering, for which we'll a minute of a silence from each one of you. Thank you very much all for a kind cooperation. Let's go for this session. On behalf of the Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, we welcome each one of you to the session on unleashing your infinite potential. We would like to especially thank Mr. T.R. Parshuram, our President and whole-time Director of Toyota Industries Engine India Private Limited, in facilitating this session for the benefit of our members. Thank you very much, President sir. The speaker for today's session is Ms. Priya Venkatraman, founder and director of Innovation and Partnership Global Coaching Lab. On behalf of BCIC, we express our sincere thanks to Ms. Priya accepting our invitation to address on this important subject. We'd also like to thank all the participants for joining in today's session. We request all of you to kindly mute your mic and webcam option. This will increase and keep the bandwidth strong as well as avoid any disturbance in the background. Please post your questions in the chat box only. The speaker will respond to the questions during the session. And also request some participants to kindly raise your hand in case you would like to ask a question. May I now invite our President, Mr. T.R. Parshram, to welcome the address and take forward the session. Over to you, President, sir.
Thank you, Prithvi. First of all, very, very wonderful evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I have to, first of all, sincerely thank. I think the thanks not to me. I think first thanks should go to Priya Ram, who connected me with Sri Priya Venkatraman. Thank you, Priya, in a short notice, and our sincere apologies for not inviting you much earlier. In fact, we tried to bring Sri Priya Venkatraman much earlier. We tried from the Bangalore chambers. Because of our busy schedule, we could not get it. We could not get her, but I think we got Mr. Venkatraman. That was a great prize. I think he really fascinated the chambers, and still so many people have been talking about the kind of a power talk he has given, which is unfinished, I would say, because he had put it in the kind of a break. He has created so much of fascination and made the people think. I think I have to get him for the second session so that the whole thing is getting to some kind of a form. But I think it was a fantastic session we had, and he brought in so much of synergy in terms of a paradigm thinking shift. Thank you, sir. And today, I have to sincerely thank Mrs. Sri Priya Venkatraman for accepting our notice, for invitation in a very short notice. Thank you, ma'am. In fact, you have been very, very busy. I'm told you are in Singapore, and in spite of your busy schedule, you have accepted our invitation. I'm very grateful to you. And on behalf of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, I extend a very hearty welcome to you for today's session. In fact, today we're all very lucky to hear her because I heard her once and I was very fascinated. And I decided that we should somehow bring her in a larger audience for Bangalore Chambers in a physical platform in one of our ballrooms. But it did not happen in the last year because of the pandemic. But definitely we should have both of you in a common session. And we look forward to for a physical meeting. And today I would like to briefly introduce Mrs. Sri Priya Venkatraman. She's a tall global leader. She's the founder of the Global Coaching Lab and Tripura Multinational, which is based in Singapore. She's responsible for driving innovation, maximizing partnerships, and ensuring excellence in operations. Sri Priya is an ICF certified coach from Coach Training Alliance, Colorado, USA, and has enjoyed the opportunity to coach individuals from different countries, cultures, and diverse backgrounds. Priya focuses her coaching on two specific areas: leadership coaching and cross-cultural diversity coaching. Being a classical Bharatanatyam dancer for the last 35 years has given her the edge to combine the power of arts and dance to help leaders and professionals discover possibilities by tapping into the power of emotions and behaviors to enable powerful constructive shifts to their leadership. Today, Priya is passionate about positively influencing and transforming the lives of millions of people around the world. And this core principle forms the foundation for the vision and mission of both our companies, and that is to touch and transform 100 million lives by 2025. This target is more taller than a 5 billion Indian economy. Definitely, God bless you and hats off to you. And a billion lives by 2030. Wow. Hats off to you, ma'am. And wish you all the very best in your initiatives. And I'm sure we'll all be with you to achieve this tall goal. And I'm sure, I think you will definitely achieve it in flying colors. So I don't want to take much of your time. With this introduction, I hand it over to Mrs. Priya Venkatraman. Over to you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Parashuраman, and my thanks and wishes to all the Bangalore Chamber for giving me this opportunity. And I'm going to share my screen and begin the presentation. Just give me a second. Is my screen visible to all of you?
Yes, we can see that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for being here. And by your presence here, it only tells me that you all have infinite potential and you want to unleash it. And I'm hoping that's the reason why we are all here in this talk. So I want to go about starting this presentation by asking a simple question. And this is all about, if time and money were no constraints, what could you achieve? I want you all to take a minute, reflect, and think about it. You don't need to share your answers with me, but you could perhaps, reflect. So I'm sure most of you would have come up with some possibilities for each one of you. And I'm sure that can become infinite, right? So I think that's the focus of this conversation. And I want to start by sharing my journey and my discovery in this process, where it started with a young toddler learning dance and how it connected to some of my realizations on people and leadership, and therefore the work that I'm doing right now. So this was about 35 years ago when I was 7 or 8 years old. I started learning dance, and I think it was because my mother pushed me to a dance class, which thinking I will figure it out. So it all started with a lot of pain for me, where it was all about, as a young child, I had to endure to the long hours of class, at least 1 or 2 hours, which was new for a 7 or 8-year-old. And then there was a lot of strength one needed to build, because otherwise you would get nice kickings by your teachers where you're not able to sit in a posture for a long time. And then it also required a lot of mental endurance to learn number of things, remember it, and then carry on. And it also brought a lot of flexibility to my body, and I think it has led it to my mind as well now, and a lot of agility in how you have to present in front of people and ensure that you're giving a great experiences to audiences who attend your performances. So it all started as pain, but then slowly it moved to poise. And then today it gives me a lot of pride to say how much it has shaped my life. And that is where I started reflecting. I took dance and I started reflecting and saying the stories in dance are classical. The underlying principles, what I've learned in dance, are actually eternal. And the possibilities for depiction are supernal. And the audience experience is transformational and sometimes surreal. And this actually was a discovery where I said, look, stories, you're depicting stories from your mythology or any of the pieces in a classical dance format, and they're all the principles that help us to connect with the audience and see what possibilities we can be there as a dancer and depict in front of them. And that slowly connected to 10 years later, where I started discovering from in 2010, where this journey of transforming leaders began for both me and my husband, where we started these organizations. And that's when I said, look, there is something that's missing in this leadership journey. And what is it? And that's where all this emotional intelligence and all of that were kind of coming up to people. And they're saying, look, leaders need to have showcase multiple emotions. They need to be fluid. And then I said, look, how do we develop leaders to tap into all of that? And that's where my journey of connecting what I started at 7 came back to me in my 30s, where I was looking at transforming leaders. And that's how it began, as a journey to connect dance and into leadership. And this also opened my eyes a few years back when I read the World Economic Forum actually saying that for the world to achieve its sustainable developmental goals by 2030, countries and organizations need to embrace more artists and cultural leaders. And my belief was reiterated when a forum like World Economic Forum is saying that. It means they have done a lot of research and their thought leaders have contributed to this, and it kind of reaffirmed my belief in what dance can do to leadership. And that's when I discovered an interesting leadership development piece by Professor Philippe Rosinski. And this is where it started as and he depicted this model as an infinity or a Mobius strip, where it talked about the physical, the managerial, psychological, cultural, political, and spiritual components all needed to move together and help a leader make an impact and difference. So physical is all about your strength, endurance, flexibility, balance, and breathing. And that component connecting to your leadership, where it is not just what you do as a dance format or as what you practice as a fitness or a health regimen, but it's about connecting it to your mental strength, mental flexibility, and emotional flexibility. All those connections were slowly triggered when I was introduced to this model. And also managerial, where managers are not just about looking down and managing or just giving or doing a lot of things. It's about ensuring you're able to manage down better, manage across better, manage up better. Once again, I saw things had to work in an interconnected manner. And psychological, of course, because if you are dealing with people, you better understand yourself first before you work with them. And that's where you can understand irrational behaviors better in yourself and in others. And cultural is all about creativity and diversity, which is what is important as we move forward in this in this post-COVID era, where you have to become creative as a leader to manage the complexities. And political, all about the service and power dynamics that you need to understand to play constructive politics. And spiritual, of course, nothing to talk about religion, but it's about ensuring there is a larger connected to your meaning, purpose, and unity to whatever you do. So this was where we were figuring out how to develop leaders, and I was able to connect dance through this global leadership model to transforming leaders. And that is where I kind of realized that in order to bring out the best in people, you require 4 elements. And the first is you'll have to bring together unchanging principles of life together, because it's not just about starting off in vacuum. So you first have to look at the values and the principles that bring people together. The examples here could be values of honesty and integrity, or a drive for excellence, or a passion to be world class. These are all examples of how you could bring these unchanging principles to make and transform people. The second dimension is all about practices that have proven effective in delivering results. So once again, beyond principles, you got to connect it to practices, which means, are you looking at frameworks, models, or any of the principles that can help you to connect the dots from whatever you're transforming people with to using a model to put things into practice. And then it's all about perspectives, and which can widen your lenses and also multiply your options to address the complexities and challenges that we face. So this is where the model that I spoke about, the spiritual, political, cultural, managerial, psychological, and physical, all coming together. So you need to have these kinds of options to use under a given circumstance to address complexities. And the other important thing is, how do you look at possibilities? So what starts as principles move to practices, then it moves to perspectives, and then to possibilities that can reframe your current realities. So when you have to transform people, or when you want to work on ensuring that you have bring people and their aspirations and the collective aspirations of organizations together, some of these dynamics have to be used in an interconnected manner. And that's where my journey of connecting dance to this model by Philippe Rosinski and to the realities of how people have to be transformed and came into picture. And that's how all this connection came into reality in transforming leaders. And this is where I want to reiterate, go back to what I said. The dance is all about the stories, the principles, the possibilities, and the experience. And that is what is actually the connection to transforming and becoming global leaders today. And when it comes to infinite possibilities in people, I wanted to touch upon a very important dynamic here, which I discovered through dance, and I have connected it to leadership, which is through this topic on archetypes, which is all about assessing the heroes and sheroes within you. It's also about how you can think of archetypes as bundles of emotions that you can call upon at will, and they just have a short label attached. And what I've discovered is that these archetypes are universal. They exist within all of you. And they also helps us to understand the masculine and the feminine. So here where you see talking organizations dealing with gender diversity challenges, what they have to start recognizing is that inside an individual, there is both a masculine and a feminine. It can be a male or a female. They both have this. And how do you leverage this masculine and feminine to develop your people or to achieve your goals and whatever objectives that you're set out for? So this is where the connection to archetypes become critical. I'd like to understand if any of you know what these archetypes are, or is there anything interesting that you want to share with me? I just want to take a pause here to understand, to take some, to hear from you all, to understand what you understand by archetypes. Anybody? I am unable to see all of you, but well, let me just move my screen and come here. So anybody who wants to take your take on archetypes, that'll be good for me before I move further. Good. I'm going to move forward right now, but I'm happy to address some of these any ideas or any thoughts that come for you or any clarifications later on. So let's start with an example here, because I don't want to just jump into talking about them. Let's start with an example of a warrior archetype, and we'll talk about some leaders we have transformed using this. So there was a leader in a management consulting firm where he came to us during one of the coaching engagements where he said, look, when I am with my team, I am like the lion. But when I go up to my leadership team, I become the mouse. So it's not that he was not competent enough to be the leader he is, but there were some underlying fears, uncertainties, and doubts that was holding him back. And that is when we leveraged the warrior archetype to make him think about it. I want you all to take a minute and see how many of you have felt this way, where you are with certain group of people, you are the lion, and at certain instances you become the mouse. So let's now talk about this warrior a little deeper. So what does the term warrior bring to your mind? Since I'm not able to speak with you, I'm just moving forward. I would have loved to engage the audience here, but I'm going to move forward with the presentation and later on discuss anything that comes to your mind. So what does this term warrior bring to all of us? It's about the strength, The warrior is all about building the physical strength first, because none of us can, if you look at a warrior archetype or somebody who is going to fight in a war, he has to prepare himself physically and then connect that physical endurance to the mental endurance that he is able to slowly develop and then get into war. So he can't jump into war day one. In a similar manner, the warrior is all about strength in the posture, preparation before an engagement, and having a winner's mindset and having the agility to face multiple situations and circumstances. So what kinds of situations can benefit from you adopting the warrior mindset? And some of the typical situations that we have in organizations could be your leadership team meetings, perhaps critical customer conversations, or sometimes crucial confrontations. So you need to have the ability to not accommodate or compromise, but you need to create a win-win situation in some of these critical discussions. So it's sometimes people think win-win as 50-50, but the actual win-win is 150-150, right? So how do you develop a warrior mindset to kind of address these kinds of complex situations? And you'll sometimes, it may be, I mean, we'll go deeper into it later, but sometimes you need to couple the warrior with the sage archetype to actually become an assertive warrior, because it's not about your aggressiveness that matters in these situations, but it's about your assertiveness. But we saw this leader invoke this archetype, and it took a period of time before he transformed himself, and he became he was a partner already, and now today he manages about 7 or 8 partners under him. So it was a transition that he made by invoking this archetype, and it was an interesting journey for him. Similarly, there are about 12 different archetypes that can be called upon will, and these are all what I call as leadership possibilities for all of you to tap into the infinite potential. So let's just take a look at them. So it starts with the warrior, the innocent, destroyer, victim, caregiver, lover, creator, explorer, ruler, magician, sage, and fool. So these are what I call as Carol Pearson's archetypes. This was there are all these psychologists or psychotherapists have come up with different versions of them, and you could refer to any of them. But what is important is these are all personalities or emotions that all of us have within. And most of us have forgotten that there are so many emotions because we've become a product of few. So some of these personalities or emotions can actually help us tackle challenges. Innocent is like the warmth that you can showcase to people. Sometimes we become so focused on challenges and to address that we jump to the executive function in our brain to just go and address people and ask them for questions, the why questions always, before even developing the warmth and connection with people before you address complexity. So sometimes the innocent archetype can totally help us. The destroyer, sometimes we think that having too much on our plates is actually better, but whereas when you destroy, it can be constructive too, because it'll help you achieve things with focus. The victim, I mean, we see a lot of victims in the world, and here I'm not talking about negative victims, we're talking about positive victims, like examples like Malala or Mahatma Gandhi or Nelson Mandela, where you see leaders who have turned their victim to something more constructive. And those are the victim archetypes that we are talking about. And similarly, there are things like caregiver, lover, and caregiver is very important because today leaders are talking about empathy. And how does that emotion get invoked in situations? It's when you invoke a caregiver archetype. So unless you develop that emotion, you're not going to be able to showcase empathy in situations that it warrants. So some of these things may look like different piece of work, non-connected to leadership, but slowly when you start connecting these personalities, it will make a great difference to what you're trying to achieve. So let's take some further examples, because I want to give you some examples of real life instances on transformation that we've done that can help you connect it and put it in context. So let's look at the fool archetype. And here there was a situation where a leader was taking his team out for dinner and everybody seemed to be having fun while this leader was standing alone with a glass in hand. And this is where we realize that it's not about him and it is not him versus them. He needs to blend with his team in situations. And that is where we help him invoke the fool archetype. It takes a lot of practice where he has to practice it as in role plays or sometimes with his trusted network of people where it is about him invoking the archetype. And fool is not about being an idiot. It is not about taking yourself too seriously. So you'll have to showcase that you're human as well as a leader, and your ego should not isolate you. So this is where just letting go and having some fun, the ability to have fun and unleash the inner child will make a big difference. And coming back, he started integrating better with his teams and he was rewarded with the highest employee engagement scores. So this is where some of these archetypes have made a significant impact to leaders. So let's think about yourself here. The questions that you need to answer are you showcasing enough vulnerability? Can you become self-deprecating, sometimes having that ability to use yourself as to invoke humor? Or are people comfortable in your presence? And do they crack jokes with you? Or do you inject fun and humor in meetings? And this is also about the interplay of the masculine and the feminine inside each one of you. So sometimes, like when we spoke about the ability to showcase empathy, you need to invoke the feminine inside you, which is what the caregiver is all about. But when you want to showcase passion, which we also saw an archetype called the lover, so that showcases a lot of passion to your work and dedication, which is also which is a little bit masculine. So it's an interplay of these archetypes, and it's an interplay of these the masculine and the feminine that can help you look at infinite possibilities. Let's look at another example called the magician. So here there's a leader who was one of those key leaders in a market intelligence function. And typically he was under the radar, comfortable in reporting and being reactive to overall things, and discovered the magician archetype. And as part of his coaching, he decided to do three things actually. So one was he wanted to showcase that he could do magic and he could practice magic, in which we've all actually, as children, we would have really enjoyed magic shows and magician as an archetype, but we've slowly forgotten that. But by this leader invoking the magician, he reached out, he took the effort to reach out to someone senior. He walked into their unknown to help them look at him and his capabilities differently. And he stepped up as a profit center in his own right to start contributing at a global level. And he brought his ideas through an Olympiad that actually helped others appreciate the magic around insights and foresights. So just by invoking this archetype, he was able to accomplish something that he had never dreamt of earlier. And this was one of our leader coaches recently. And let's look at a last example of a ruler archetype. Here was the CEO of a 2,000 crore company, and he was actually smart, but he was wallowing in self-pity. He was complaining about everything is working against him, and he was had some strained relationships, personal relationships. And when he discovered the ruler archetype, it was all about a ruler is always somebody who thinks ahead. It's all about the vision, the direction and taking control. A ruler cannot have the ability to let go for his people. He needs to take control and display acumen in situations where he needs to think ahead. And that's why we call the helicoptering of, thinking ahead before others are able to look at it. And it's about being decisive and building a team of experts. And that's what a ruler archetype gave possibilities for him. And today, it was all about, what do I say? He is now moved, and I think very recently he's opened a big plant, large plant in Tamil Nadu, which is for 4,000 crores. And when he saw the possibilities through these archetypes, he slowly changed. And this is where some of these archetypes, which I learned through dance, connected it to situations in leaderships and invoking it in people. It takes time because people are very rigid. They feel that, look, I cannot display these emotions, and they think it may look childish. But what we encourage them is to become childlike, to start invoking these emotions so that they're able to transform themselves and look at possibilities, because you can't tackle the current complexities just by the frameworks or the models that we are all used to, which is what we've learned a lot from all the best Ivy League colleges or from the best organizations that have come up with frameworks and research that is driven around it. So all of it has to start with the possibilities need to have a combination of, as I said, practices don't go away. So you need those frameworks, but couple it with emotions and possibilities, because that's where the combination is more potent and you're able to tackle these complexities better. And the beauty of these archetypes is that helps you to blend the masculine and the feminine. So therefore, it's not about it's about a new way of looking at diversity rather than the limited way of looking at diversity and inclusion so far. So it's about helping people raise above and look at possibilities from a different lens. So I want to bring it all together, and I want to ask each one of you to answer some of this. I'd like you to take a minute and say, what are those archetypes that I leverage, which means where you're able to easily use them to maximize your impact. So I want you to answer these 4 questions. The second is those that I use, and which is not like you're leveraging them, but you're using them, and those I do not use, and those that are my blind spots. I want you to take the time and actually, do this little exercise. It might help you connect the dots to something that is a need for you. I want to thank you all for taking the time to do it, and I'm happy to address some of your thoughts first on the topic and what I've shared, and then look at any areas that we could address together.
There's a question that I see from Mahesh Arya. You have raised your hand, Mahesh.
Yes, Mahesh. Mahesh, you'll have to unmute yourself. I have. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Parshuram.
Yeah, see, how do you discover this kind of traits in you? Like, you have any kind of a structured approach, right? You have various traits, combination of traits, and situational traits.
Yes.
So, which is your true north? Like, you have any kind of a tool where you'd be able to evaluate? Of course, this is all some kind
Yes.
of a combinations happen mostly in life.
True.
Certain situations, like you rise to the occasions
Yeah.
temporarily, but you don't see a true north. So, in
Correct.
fact, many times, the organizations also struggle to find out the
Correct.
leaders who have the potential to grow. That's a common issue of HR.
Correct.
They fail to identify the right spots, and
Correct.
sometimes, we regret for that. So, you have any
Correct.
specific tools to identify this particular traits in you?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great question, Mr. Parshuram. And this body of work actually has an assessment where it tells people. I think it's called Unleashing the Heroes Within, and it's one of the well-known authors. And I'm failed to recall the name of the author, but he has an assessment across these different archetypes, which organizations and individuals can actually take. It can be a self-assessment as well, to find out what traits are you showcasing more often, and what you could actually, based on your personality, what could you actually leverage more. So once you start doing that, and once people's awareness increase, that is when most situations people are not able to use, because their lack of they're not aware that they have this possibility. So once they raise their awareness with a tool like this, it can perhaps guide them to better choices.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much. In
Thank
fact,
you.
you talked about the child ego in a man. I think which is
Yeah.
a great tool to really enjoy.
Correct.
Right, the unlearning happens there, and most of the kind of we have a lot of frills around us.
Correct.
So, one question that was coming in the seminars was, how do you get your child ego back to your school days or college days? It was asked
Correct.
in the previous seminar. Probably I thought I should raise this question to you.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's interesting, and it's about, sometimes when you look at situations, a question that as coaches we ask is, what would your 8-year-old self, how would your 8-year-old self react to this, right? And that is where invoking the innocent archetype, because you need to have some curiosity, because if you don't apply curiosity, you're not going to look at possibilities, because you're going to be stuck with your frame and lens. So I think invoking the innocent archetype could be a great start point here. And that's when you access the child in you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer, in one of the leadership programs, we actually made the leaders dance to, I think, the famous movie Sound of Music. And it has an interesting childlike song, Do Re Mi, which all of us know. So leaders actually performed that, and they were a little hesitant in the beginning. But the moment I gave them a skipping rope and I made them to dance with it, that's when they're actually, at the end of 5 minutes, they relaxed. So for you to invoke the child inside you, you need to first touch upon that emotion. We are so stiff and we can't just think about it sitting in a boardroom. So you got to tap into the emotion very easily. That's where the fluidity is important.
That's right. Thank you so much. If
Absolutely.
somebody has just written a comment, so it's all about invoking the inner strength of warrior in us when we face high stakes situation. I think this is from PR. I don't know what's the name of the person.
Okay, I'm unable to see the chat, but yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mr. Parshuraman.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sure many people have thousands of questions. See, again, probably people should open out. I think it's too short a time. I'm sure the people sitting here all they will have hundreds of questions. So
Correct.
probably I'm wondering, yeah.
Sure. We'll give it
Please feel free to talk. I request all of you to raise your questions more frankly. So it's a great opportunity for us to interact with.
Yeah, I see some things. I see some questions coming, but I am unable to see the chat. I can see what your view on belief and assumptions. Which one?
Yes, that's right. And one more thing is, what has been the improvement in effectiveness of the NICE leadership training program? An example, please. Somebody has said.
Okay.
From Jagadish.
So, I mean, this leadership program that we do is primarily using the 6 different perspectives, and in that we also combine this archetype. So what we've observed and seen as how leaders have transitioned over a period of time is that they're able to become very fluid, they're able to reframe their situations more easily. I can recall one of the participants who's a very senior leader in one of the world's largest software manufacturing companies, and he was actually telling me that when I asked him about, after 6 months after he went through the program, I asked him what are the big differences you're able to see, and he said that, look, I have now started leveraging the cultural perspective, and I've also started recognizing the sage archetype, because his personality was very aggressive. He would just go and he would rubbish people, and he would be very aggressive when it came to he had the competitive mindset, which is to, I need to win. But then when he was dealing with this customer in Japan, that's when he said, look, I'm now become more culturally I understand that people are different, and I need to leverage them with a certain rhythm and not showcase my aggressive trait. And then he also invoked the sage archetype, which is to say, I need to step back, reflect, I should be wise, not aggressive. So that is where he made a difference. So leaders who've gone through these kind of interventions, each one has a story. But some of them, it's not that everybody will require everything. It's people, each one knows what their blind spots are and where they need to accelerate more. So that's the impact, I would say, for somebody who has asked it. I didn't know who's the name of the person, but yeah, those are
Magesh, I
some
think. Yeah.
stories.
Thank you.
Yeah.
In fact, this has been one of the biggest challenges in many of the corporates. So we could see a lot of excellent leaders, but they lack certain traits. You talked about some big person, reading something when the whole crowd is enjoying in a picnic or a party.
Correct.
I think these kind of challenges we come across in several of the. In fact, in one session, I found a very tough leader, who has been extremely tough. People used to shiver looking at him. So when I was talking to him, he was crying like a child, actually.
Correct.
They look outside very, very strong, and they pose that kind of this thing.
Correct.
But inside, they are too soft, and these kind of challenges also. People tend to put a lot of layers around them. So the challenge is how to remove those layers. I think that's the question that I asked you. I think you said, how to unleash those qualities is very important.
Correct. I also saw a question around beliefs and assumptions and things. I think it starts with your belief, and your belief makes you to assume some things, right? So I think fundamental things are about addressing beliefs, and then it helps you to look at all the other dimensions, like your choices fall out of your belief. So if you're able to work on the beliefs and mindsets first, then it helps you to have better choices.
One more question is, how can I fight the fear about the acceptance of my new ideas when it is unleashed on my colleagues?
Great. I think so how can you let go of fear, or what was the question, Mr. Parashuraman?
How can I fight the fear
about
the acceptance of my new ideas when it is unleashed on my colleagues? Probably talking about, people not accepting and the fear of rejection.
Correct. And I think if I have to, each person have to address their fears in their own personal manners. But that's where I said, looking at invoke some of these personalities that can give you the inspiration or can help you. It's like just ensuring that you're striking the match, and then the match to the fire then comes, right? So I think it's about trying to use any of these archetypes that you can begin with. So in order to let go of your fear, at first it's you start with thinking what causes the fear. Is it people, or is it my voice, or what? And I pretty much fear comes because the lack of the voice, and that's where a warrior archetype coupled with some of the abilities of being the ruler, because you got to get your voice out. So combining these personalities and getting to practice some breathing that can help your voice be more structured and more confident could be a starting point. And that's where you'll have to invoke these personalities. It's like you invoke a deity for a particular festival. You got to invoke these personalities inside you, and each of them will help you to start your journey. Because if you are under the radar all the time and unsure and fearful about getting your voice out, at an overall point, it can affect your mental and confidence as well. So you will need to start by invoking some of these archetypes.
That's great. Prakash, you have a question. Can you raise your question? G. Prakash.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I have of course, sorry, I joined a little bit in the middle, but of course, I could understand the context. I just have a question, this related to the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a very famous book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow.
Yes.
Where we come across, of course, it is about leadership, decision making, and all that. What I understand is it is trying to, of course, make you aware of what are the kind of biases you have, what kind of personalities people have, why they have such personalities. But at some point of time, it's always trying to look at as leaders have to embrace more of a rational and logical behavior. Is it all the time possible to embrace this thing? Because you have to be sometimes intuitive, you have to react. What's your view on that?
So I mean, Mr. Prakash, I think it's not just about left or the right? It's not the tyranny of the or, it's the possibilities of the and. So you're right. You have to combine both of them, especially in the current circumstances. You can't just look at logic and reason or look at numbers and quotas to run a business. You got to look at people and their challenges. So that requires some bit of emotion. So there are lots of people who come up with different points of view or different ways of saying things. But at the end of it, I think it's a combination. It's the possibilities that of and not the tyranny of the or.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Yeah. So I see somebody who has said other archetypes like visionary, imagination, determination. Mr. Jagdish, I think so. These are all traits, and when you look at visionary is the leader, the ruler, and imagination is when you are the explorer or the creator, and determination is when you show the warrior. So I've covered the very uber umbrellas. Under them there are lots of traits. So what you are calling out looks like traits to me, and they would fit under it, but you could explore more. I've just used Carol Pearson's 12 archetypes so that it's simple and it's easy. There are lots of other people who have given different names, so there are different terminologies people use for archetypes, but you could refer to any of them, but predominantly a lot of them fit under this umbrella. So good. I think I'm not sure if there are any other questions, Mr. Parashuraman. I could only see a few in the chat box here.
Yeah, I think there should be a number of questions coming out.
Okay.
Maybe still, it's getting unleashed. So I think, people would definitely start thinking.
Sure. I just want to spark people to think for possibilities, because all of us want to achieve infinite possibilities for us and say we have infinite potential, but you got to start somewhere. And we have learned that it's when you look at things from an interconnected perspective and nothing in isolation, that's the best. And some of these things require a little out of box approaches, like archetypes is one out of box approach, and I'm sure each one of you can come with many more. So something which is not the normal, which is what will help us to look at new possibilities. And I'd like to thank you, Mr. Parashuraman, for this opportunity. And I look forward to staying in touch with the chamber and continuing my association with you all.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was wonderful. In fact, you could bring out the big picture very, very nicely. And I think this has been one of the biggest challenges facing the world today. In fact, what is my true north? And, so many talents go unwasted. They go wasted because people don't discover their own powers. I think you brought that mega picture so beautifully. I think if HR across the nation, I think we're able to address these kind of issues more microscopic. I'm sure we can address more mega challenges of the future. Dr. Augustus, our chairman of HR committee, is here. Augustus, you would like to say something? Problem in this. Yeah, I think there is some connectivity issue. I'm not able to connect him, madam. So I think today was a great eye-opener for all of us.
Thank you.
You brought such a very simple perspective of the whole thing, how one art can really bring in so many other traits within you. And everything is interconnected. I think that's a kind of a key takeaway for us. And I think first step how one should take to unleash your true potential. And I think how to start the journey. I think we always keep telling in Japanese culture, one is better than zero. You don't have to go achieve 20 or 30. I think one step at a time. And I think you should be consistent in that step and you should go to the next level. I think that's been kind of a great achievement of Japanese people when I compare them with the rest of the world. Therefore, I think you said very importantly, how do we connect all these things? How do we unleash these things for kind of improving our potential? And how do we identify our own traits, various traits in us, and how do we use them for our own excellence?
Absolutely.
I think, I'm sure that each one is an ocean, and you would have done a doctorate on each of those things. So given this kind of 1 hour, I think you brought the big picture so beautifully. Once again, thank you from the heart, because you really accepted our invitation. Last time we could not get you to our chambers. So I'm very thankful to you for sparing your valuable time. And I also thank Priya Ram for connecting us.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we look forward to your association for BCIC in our future interactions. In fact, we are one of the largest chambers, regional chambers in the country.
Absolutely.
With 850+ members, and we represent 95% of the capital employed, the state of Karnataka, and 90% of the corporate labor employed.
Correct.
So we dialogue with people on several issues, but we have very active human resource and women empowerment committee.
Wonderful.
So Lavanya was also there and not able to see her. So I think we look forward to your views on future activities of our chambers.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much. Then I hand it over to Prithvi for a small felicitation.
Thank you.
Thank you, President sir. Thank you, Sri Priya ma'am, for this wonderful presentation you've done today. As a token of appreciation from the Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce and the office bearers of BCIC, we will give a small virtual token of appreciation, and we'll ensure that it reaches your Chennai office. I'll request Prasad to kindly help to do the facilitation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this, sir. And then shall we have the national anthem played, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so
Can
we
we have a
have
group
national
photo,
anthem played.
Prithvi? Prithvi,
Yeah, we
before
can
the
have.
national anthem, and people can come on the video.
Yeah,
I think
I
we can have a group.
request all the participants to kindly on your webcam so that we could take a group photo.
Please unleash.
The first step in unleashing potential is being visible.
Truly. I think, Prithvi, I think I request all of you to come on the video, please.
Please switch on the webcam so that we could take a group photo. Request the participants.
Prithvi, where are you? You have to do that first. Where are you?
My laptop is gone for a toss. It's getting
Come
on, but I'm not able to do it. Rupa, can you come at least?
There you are, Prithvi. We can see you.
Yeah. You look like the music director, Iman.
Thanks for the compliment, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I think this doesn't need a special training, I suppose.
Yeah.
You have to just. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So we'll
ma'am.
conclude with our national anthem, sir.
Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you, Mr. Venkatraman. Pleasure
Thank you.
meeting.
Pleasure. We'll
You
stay
bring,
in touch.
You bring tons of energy. Both of you bring tons of energy. God bless.
Look forward.
Thank you so much. We look forward to a physical meeting next time.
100%.
Sir, I'll have the national anthem played, sir.
Sure.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you.